Today's video is a topic that I've been wanting to explore for a while on this channel, and it's an introduction as to why us gardeners and growers need to take wood chip more seriously. So this video is going to be a little different. There's a lot of jobs to catch up with in the garden, so I'm going to crack on with all of these whilst we have just a bit of an informal conversation about wood chip. And also a really quick reminder about the competition that I mentioned in last week's video. There's a link down below to check that out, but it's to win a bunch of things from my online garden centre, hughesgarden.com. So wood chip is a bit of an interesting topic because I feel that there's a lot of debates in the growing community about it as a resource. And there's definitely a lot of myths and misconceptions that surround wood chip. I kind of want to use this video as a way of putting a case forward for wood chip to kind of be on its side and actually unpack some of those myths and misconceptions, but also open up to elements of wood chip that I've been learning about and I'm thinking, hang on a minute, this needs to be taken seriously. I'm just stripping down some beans here, which I'm going to save the seed for, and it's always quite a bit of a fun job. But the first core benefit I feel that wood chip offers is actually as a compost material, as a way to create compost in bulk. Because wood chip is one of those things that it takes a while to break down, but you kind of forget about it, and then kind of 3 years later, you suddenly discover this pile of this most amazing compost as a mulching compost ready to be used in the garden. And if you have, say, more of a homestead or small holding setup or quite a big garden, one of the most easy ways that you can utilize wood chip is just to create a massive pile of it and then turn it every 3 or 4 months, just give it a bit of a turn. And in about 2 or 3 years, you're going to have some lovely quality mulch to use on your garden. Additionally, if you have access to a lot of manure, or perhaps you keep some poultry, etc., you can actually make a really good ready to go compost in terms of being absolutely perfect for growing annual crops. By doing kind of a 2-to-1 or a 1-to-1 ratio of wood chip and manure, if you keep that turned, what you can expect is perhaps compost in as little as 1 to 2 years, depending on how fine the wood chip is. Now, the other thing as well, depending on your gardening style, you might not need to have absolutely beautiful, fluffy like compost to mulch your beds. Perhaps you don't mind having a little bit of fibre within it. It all comes down to personal preference. One of the biggest misconceptions around wood chip is the idea of nitrogen robbery or nitrogen tie-up. But that only happens when you actually mix the wood chip into the soil or dig it in. And that doesn't concern us because this is a no-dig or no-till YouTube channel after all. So the worry about actual nitrogen tie-up is wood in general is a really carbon-rich resource. We all know that. The typical carbon to nitrogen ratio of wood is around 500 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. So if, say, a compost recipe, you want ideally a ratio of 30-to-1, which is why there is such a concern around the nitrogen. And when you mix such a carbon-rich material into the soil and you dig it, fork it in, mix it in, the actual soil life needs to take nitrogen to help with the breakdown process, which is what can cause that nitrogen depletion and cause crops to not really grow very well. However, if you just apply wood chip as a layered mulch on top, the only slight bit of nitrogen loss will be just where the wood chip is touching the surface of the soil. And in fact, in almost every case that I've tried it, I've never seen any kind of annual plant suffer from a lack of nitrogen if wood chip is just carefully put on the surface. You don't need to worry about nitrogen robbery. So just a quick note on nitrogen tie-up if you have mixed in wood chip. Nitrogen tie-up is always a temporary thing. So after 2 to 3 years, it's not something that you need to worry. So if you incorporate it now and you're not going to plant in it for a couple of years, it's just covered and mulched, that's absolutely okay. Now, of course, common knowledge tells us that it isn't suitable to mulch our annual crops with wood chip? Or is it? So I want to introduce you to, I think, the most exciting and the most suitable type of wood chip for us gardeners, which is known as ramial chipwood, also abbreviated as RCW. What is it? Ramial chipwood is used to improve soils on farms and gardens. It is made by chipping smaller, younger branches, typically up to around 7 centimetres in diameter, which are freshly harvested from hedges, coppices or annual prunings. And the word ramial comes from the Latin ramus, meaning branch. One of the pioneers of RCW describes it as copy and pasting forest soils and putting them onto agricultural soils. And I thought, what a beautiful description. Because if you think about forests and you look at the forest floor, those tend to be the most thriving types of soils and ecosystems in the world, and that's a very carbon rich place to be in. But carbon is a building block of life, as we all know, and I think sometimes we just get a little bit too caught up on the nitrogen when really what matters most is the carbon in the soils. Young branches form the most vigorous growth of a tree, and because of that there's going to be a lot more nutrition in young branches compared to older, thicker wood. Now in fact, the reason why we choose the 7 centimetre and under diameter is because in the smaller branches they consist of around 75% of all of the tree's minerals, sugars, nutrients, etc. And interestingly have a carbon to nitrogen ratio of around 1 to 100. And because of this greater nutrition, it actually means that for fungi and other microorganisms, they find it much easier to break down ramial chipwood compared to just normal wood chip where you're taking it from the thicker parts of the tree. So although ramial chipwood can be applied and mixed into the soil, the most popular ways of using it is either as a surface mulch or actually by composting. Now interestingly, there's a guy called Ian Tolhurst from Tolhurst Organics in the UK, and I saw a video where he said that actually composting, and when he was doing some trials, seemed to make no difference compared to just applying the ramial chip wood onto the surface of the beds when growing crops. And I thought that that is really interesting and worth exploring. There are numerous documented benefits for ramial chipped wood. Some of the key ones, of course, is going to be adding carbon to the soil, adding nutrients to the soil, retaining soil moisture, which is going to be a really important one, especially after years like this. That's certainly something us gardeners are having to think about more. Then as a normal mulch in terms of suppressing weeds, but it can also offer other benefits such as stabilising soil temperature and helping to neutralise acidic soils. Typically, ramial chipped wood is wood that's chipped during dormancy, so kind of around autumn and winter without the leaves, and then it's either applied to the ground straight away, which is the best thing you want to do with it, unless you want to put it in a pile and compost and break it down. So as you can see, we've really just scratched the surface when it comes to ramial chip wood. I think it's something that is hugely promising, but I'm not telling you to drop everything that you're doing and just use ramial chip wood. I do feel that there needs to be more research and experimentation, and that's something we're really going to be focusing on at our other growing site, especially using ramial chip wood in raised bed situations and just seeing how it goes and having a little bit of fun. So if you want to find out more about ramial chip wood, I've actually written a blog post that is linked down below in the video description, just to give you a bit more of a comprehensive guide, best kind of trees to use, etc. Now back to general wood chip, be it wood chip or ramial chip wood, it doesn't matter. But one of the other amazing benefits it offers is as a pathway material. Firstly, it's really nice to walk on. I think it has aesthetic properties as well, but that's down to our individual preference. But it also allows for good drainage, because one of the issues with, say, grass paths is if you get a lot of rain, it can become quite slippy. There's good grip for this. Now, one of the many things that I've learned from Les Zorab was actually using wood chip paths as a way of making a mulch and a compost for the bed. So the idea is to put down a layer of wood chip, and then whenever you're weeding the beds, you know, you'll pick up a weed and you just chuck it on the path, let it break down over, say, 2-3 years. Then what you do is you scoop it up and place that onto the bed, and then you apply your fresh layer of wood chip, and that actually inspired the idea of formalizing that further with the compost pathways. One amazing thing about using wood chips as a path material is that it's a way for you to fungally and microbially connect beds. Now, it's less so apparent here because there's actually stone underneath, but if, say, you've got more of a soil-based path and then you put wood chip on top, what you're doing is you're feeding the microbial life with the wood chip, and you're connecting the garden beds with fungi, and you're helping to promote the health of the soil within the beds and also the transfer of nutrients. Now, recently I was watching a video by Richard Perkins, and he was talking about him using wood chip paths for his beds, and he mentioned about the idea of inoculating these paths with edible mushrooms so we can get an extra bit of food or an extra crop from this space, and I think that's something really interesting. My setup for making wood chip consists of 2 chippers that were kindly gifted from Forest Master. So we've got a 6 horsepower chipper, which is perfect for small gardens and kitchen gardens, but they also have a 14 horsepower chipper, which is much better for community garden, market garden setup. And they also have a great range of electrical chippers and garden shredders as well. What I could imagine in the future is community gardens and community farms working together to plant up more hedgerows or short rotation coppices, and as a result of that, producing more ramial chipped wood to build kind of security and resilience for the community in terms of fertility and mulches. Now, both of the chippers that I use are absolutely perfect for ramial chip woods, and they're ready and raring to go for when all of the leaves fall. So I believe that wood chip holds a huge potential for us gardeners. Here, you know, these are just some radishes that I've grown with a tiny bit of compost, but the only thing that this bed has really had, because it's perennials, is wood chip. And these harvests here are looking absolutely stunning. Now, earlier on in the video I mentioned about compost pathways, and I use wood chip at the bottom of those. There, I think, are one of the best ways to increase your self-sufficiency in compost. So check out that video here and stay tuned for a lot more content on this channel as I continue exploring wood chip, especially ramial chip wood.